People no longer bound by NDAs, what secrets can you expose? Story 1. In a tech support role, one manager used to boast his team's average call times were the lowest in the company. While average call times were in the 12 to 17 minute range, his team was constantly under 10 minutes. His team was awarded multiple times, and his strategy was adopted company-wide by all customer service and technical support teams, including our internal IT teams. The strategy was under a strict NDA, as we did not want to allow competitors to emulate it. When our call center would bid on contracts, it became an awesome metric. Our customer satisfaction scores are on par, but we have call times 20 to 30% lower than our competitors. The dirty secret of the NDA that I was not allowed to disclose? Their big method? Just hang up on people. Straight up. Find a way to say, okay, go ahead and do that and call back if it doesn't fix it. Then hang up. Don't wait for confirmation. Okay, so reboot your PC and your problem should be solved. Thanks for calling. Click. Eventually, they came out with more useful metrics that tracked things like first call resolution, which absolutely shredded this company, and they went out of business a year or two later. I remember reading an IT hell blog back in the late 90s or so, where a guy was documenting the crappy IT call center that he was working at, and the manager's favorite guy there had amazing numbers because he'd just tell every caller their warranty was voided and he couldn't help them. His throughput was amazing, huge call volume and very low call times. He was their department's golden boy. The thing was, he considered any action taken as voiding the warranty. Turning the PC on would void it, according to him. So naturally, they put him on a fast track to management. Everything about working at a call center sounds soul-crushing, even succeeding at one. Like hitting a home run on Alcatraz. Agreed. I used to work as a patrol officer, and my vest contained a UPS call center. We would get dispatched there very frequently on medical assist calls, usually for someone having chest pains. It seemed odd that there were so many medical calls for relatively young and healthy people. Then I got to talking to someone who used to work there and found out what was going on. If someone was sick at work and they had to go home, they'd be docked a point. Too many points and they would be fired. And it didn't take many points for that to happen. The exception was if they left for a medical emergency by ambulance. So if they weren't feeling well, but didn't want to earn a point, they would call 911 with chest pains, get transported away from the call center, and once they were around the corner, they would tell the paramedics they didn't want to go to the hospital anymore. Many years ago, I used to work at a help desk, and there was one girl who would have stats way better than anyone else with calls taken and time on calls. A few times I sat beside her and saw that she would take calls for about a minute and then hang up. I thought this was weird, as she would do it about 8 to 10 times a shift. One time when I was walking by her, I saw that she was calling someone on her cell phone, then her phone would ring. She was calling the 1-800 number when it was her time in the queue, going through the prompts and taking her own call. She would hang up before a minute was up so that it would register as a call taken. This is what I hated about my old IT job. I looked average on metrics because my calls were longer than average, my first call resolution was lower, and my overall call numbers were lower. Still in the top 10 or top 5, but I could never hit positions 1 to 3 where you really got all the attention. The reason? The top 3 guys would patrol the ticket list and take all the easy calls, fob off the harder inbound calls to other people, and generally game the system. I was picking up the trickier calls as I had more experience, for example, in tricky MS Office issues, and also had problem customers who would ask for me specifically because they knew I would actually help them, and also because I could deal with customers with anger issues that the top guys had no patience for. So my customer feedback and compliments were off the chart compared to the others, but I never got any awards or even much positive feedback and reviews because they ran off KPIs that didn't focus on customer satisfaction. Story 2. Manipulation of data to give false impressions of reliability was something I saw quite blatantly utilized with little repercussions. My company was struggling to meet on-time delivery schedules, and for numerous years was as embarrassingly low as 40%. A new manager comes in, and within months, we are now boasting an on-time delivery rate of a brilliant 95%. Turns out all he did was change what constituted an on-time delivery. Each time we knew a product would be late, we'd notify the customer of the delay and ask them to confirm they still wanted the order. If they still wanted the product, The on-time delivery would be recorded against the new expected date as opposed to the original promised date. Company literature was being sent out boasting of our 95% on-time delivery, now amongst the highest in the industry, when in fact we were, by that point, meeting less than 30% of initial delivery schedule targets. It was so simple that I'm sure numerous companies are getting away with such underhanded tricks. There is a venerable book titled How to Lie with Statistics that points out many tricks like this. It's very easy to make bad numbers seem like good numbers simply by reframing them. The more I get involved with my BI and data analyst team, the more I learn that this is literally what they do to appease the idiots at the top. They yell and scream for a number that isn't possible, so the only option is to just shift the number metrics. Boom, problem solved. The CEOs never give a crap if the company is actually doing well, as long as they can report good numbers. At least this is how it is in the private equity sphere. When metrics become targets, they cease to be effective metrics. My boss at my old phone sales job was supposed to focus on the conversion metric, i.e. number of sales divided by the number of door swings. It went from amusing small stuff, don't tell the customers to go grab lunch while you transfer data, to actual safety hazards real quick, started requiring employees to leave through the back door, which led to an unlit dark alleyway with no cameras. Eventually, one of our best workers quit because she didn't feel safe walking to her car anymore. His obsession with an ultimately meaningless metric led to a measurable decrease in total sales. He also spent hours each week watching other stores trying to catch them cheating. And I can't even say he was irrational because his own bonuses were based on that metric. It was literally costing him money for us to walk out that front door after work. An insane system that encouraged further insanity. My company just switched to the unified engineering model, fired 95% of our dedicated QAs, and now devs own the entire feature pipeline outside of the requirements. I'm now doing dev on some projects, QA on others, and managing clients and UAT on others. Let's just say it's a frickin' crap show, but looks great on paper. We recently had a company town hall where one individual made the claim that due to UE, the number of bugs went down by 40%, or something like that. In my team chat, we were immediately posting no crap because the devs, without dedicated QAs to hold them accountable, are basically self-reporting and they aren't going to do more than happy path testing. What this individual failed to mention was our downstream post-deployment tickets went up by over 60%. My team happens to be in that middle spot where we're on both sides of the pipeline, dev and customer tickets, so we see both. Someone on our team asked a question about that in the town hall, and suddenly Q&A time was over. Time to get back to work. When I was doing my military service in the 90s, in the French Army, I was in an office that was responsible for assessing the quality of the code that had been produced by a service provider every week. Another person had to calculate the number of bugs remaining compared to those that had been dealt with, and other indicators like that. He had made Excel macros all over the place, and his stuff was very complicated to understand. He went on holiday, and I wasn't told how his script worked. In short, the following week, my CEO asked me to take out the indicators, and I came up with 40% quality, whereas they were usually around 76 points. My CEO made me redo the operation once, twice, 10 times, and I always came up with the same result, well below what was usually calculated. He ended up telling me that he was going to send me to the salt mines, a way of telling me that I wasn't going to stay in an office, but on a military maneuvering ground in the middle of nowhere. And I was in an office because in the evening I continued to run my company. So the next morning I went to see the military doctor and did everything I could to get myself discharged for alcoholism, even though I didn't drink alcohol. I managed to get out of that place, and sometime later I met my former colleague, and he told me that he fudged the figures every month to please the commanding officer. Story 3. The private school I worked for was for students identified with giftedness. The owner of the school administered the giftedness test. Can you pay the tuition? You're gifted. Can your sibling pay? Them too. Your cousin? Neighbor? Kid you know across the town? You're all gifted. I've worked with 2 people in my life who went to Harvard. They were demonstrably, objectively the weakest, least intelligent people on the team both times. We had to do regular tests and exams, so it was obvious. Something else they had in common? Both come from wealthy families. One of them, I think some facility/building/room at Harvard, is named after her dad because he donated enough money. My conclusion about Harvard has always been exactly what you just said. I remember teaching middle school, and parents would get their kids tested repeatedly to get into the gifted program. Basically, it was kids who had pushy parents that got into the program. The kid who struggled with English, who was able to get B's, who was excelling in spite of his situation, who had to go home and look after his siblings and have a job, not in the program. I hate that gifted label. This is basically all colleges and online colleges now. If you can pay the tuition by taking out a loan in most cases, then you can get into college. There are no standards anymore. I worked part-time in the admissions office as an assistant, and part-time in the writing lab at a local college. I was a student. I worked with students who kept getting failing grades and were told to come to the writing lab. I'm telling you, I worked with students who literally read on maybe a 3rd grade level, couldn't spell, knew absolutely F all about basic punctuation, let alone how to write a 3-paragraph essay. They spoke with horrible grammar, but they graduated. I realized how useless a college degree is in this day and age. Story 4. About 20 years ago, I signed an NDA with a very large record company regarding their attempts to get into selling their catalog online. Streaming sales, etc. It was a minefield because they were still wary of pissing off high street retailers, and that's where the charts come from. Those attempts were frustrated by their top-level corporate guys. One week, they all went to a What is an MP3 conference in Buenos Aires to get them up to speed. The thing is, they spent so much time partying that the only talk that seemed to stick was the scare tactics about how teens could scrape MP3s from the web and they could be copied and redistributed easily. When they came back, every item in the catalog was ordered to be scrubbed from the web. No 30-second previews, nothing should be audible, not a hint of audio, lock it all down. Put all the tape in a chest and seal it with concrete at the bottom of the sea. That's gonna make everyone go back to CDs. Good old profitable CDs. One thing I noticed when working in retail sales for CDs and vinyl around the year 2000 was just how manufactured the music charts were. We would get sent boxes and boxes of a single before it was ever heard by anyone else, and it would be announced as coming in straight at number 1. It got there because the charts count how many copies are sent out to record stores, not how many actually sold to the public. Meaning they put whatever song they want in at number 1 anytime they like. They do the same thing with the book bestsellers list. For a lot of singles that hit number 1 for a week and then cratered out of the charts, we would end up sending boxes and boxes of stock back because they didn't sell. I worked for a retailer in the early 2000s. We would be sent hundreds of copies of some songs only to turn around and send them back the following week. Record companies also used to pay for airtime, aka pay radio stations to have certain songs on repeat. If you didn't pay, don't expect your artist to do well in the charts that week. I remember that Mariah Carey's ex-husband used to buy copies of her albums so they would debut at number 1 and go platinum relatively soon after release. It's amazing how the record companies used to manipulate the music charts back then. Probably still does, just in a different way. I worked for a publishing company just when ebooks were invented. One of our authors of a popular traditional print book refused to allow his book to be translated into an ebook. At the time, and perhaps still, an ebook could be downloaded 3 times to 3 different devices after paying for the book just once. Highway robbery, said the reluctant author. I pointed out to him that after paying $12 for a copy of his actual paper book, the buyer could loan that book out to an infinite number of people and it could circulate through the thrift shops, garage sales, flea markets, and used bookstores forever. Made no difference. 20 years later, his book is still not available in ebook format. This crap happens again and again and again, with the media and stupid dinosaurs still never learning from past mistakes. Hulu and Netflix breaking into the TV market, anyone with a brain and understanding of technology could see that coming from miles away. So instead of fighting it, why the hell wouldn't you embrace it as a new revenue stream? Create a partnership with the streaming service and get in on the ground floor so that you can help steer it in a direction that is mutually beneficial. No, they fight it tooth and nail. So what happens? People record and torrent the crap out of their content, and a whole new industry in illegal streaming set-top boxes starts coming out, and they lose millions and millions of dollars. Probably billions, actually. The latest is the NFL. I'm a big football fan, so this one hits me directly. If you don't already know, there is a ton of money in football. 125 million people watch at least one game a week. And it's a huge audience. So anyway, a couple of years ago, the league sold the streaming rights to YouTube, so you pay a one-time season pass fee to get all the games streamed live on YouTube. The problem is that they stuck with their archaic 1980s era model of broadcasting the games. See, every week, the networks air the games, and depending on where you live in the country, you'll get different games on Sunday. So, CBS has one game in the early afternoon, while Fox has one early game and one late afternoon game. If you're on the West Coast, maybe you watch Arizona versus Denver or something. If you're on the East Coast, it might be Baltimore versus Buffalo, for example. These particular games are blocked out on YouTube. You aren't allowed to stream them. Why? It makes no sense. I have zero problems with them making it so that my stream has the exact same content as what is on the network. I watch those same ads, I hear the same announcers call the game, and everything's the same. It's freaking Google. They're a huge tech giant. They can make that happen, no problem. But no, they stick with this stupid ancient business model that doesn't make sense anymore. The end result is that I can't watch any of those games unless I have a TV. Can't watch on my phone or laptop if I'm not at home. It's so freaking stupid and drives me nuts. Let people watch their content how they choose. There is quite a spectrum. In my undergrad uni, the Academic Integrity Council operated like a secret police force. If you thought you found a violation as a teacher, you didn't go to your department chair, you went right to them. They had this big imposing tribunal building on campus, and I think that helped to strike fear in people. Like specifically for that, not even shared with any other administration. They also did not mess around. They made that clear freshman year when they told us that they would waste no time kicking you out. And it was true. Anyone who happened to go to that court building was already screwed by that point, even if it was supposed to seem like they had a chance at appeal. That being said, I don't think that was normal at all. My graduate program had nothing like that at all. No building on campus, no mention to people about it being beyond the boilerplate, don't cheat please on the syllabus, cheating allegations, you just bark up the pole and nothing really seems to happen. It was more of a rich person's private school, while the other uni was a state flagship. Story 5. At my old job, Pam helped me relocate my client's ad scheduling so I could invoice out a little extra for the last month of December 2014, helping me hit my yearly budget. I got let go 2 weeks after that, and I believe the original plan was to fire me under the justification of missing my yearly budget. Instead, I got a severance of $15,000. I believe Pam knew or heard what the lay of the land was and helped me out. Appreciate you, Pam. My dad was axed in a similar manner in 2005. Was already on the chopping block for chronic illness the previous 2 years, but his HR rep suddenly got on his case about being up to date on certain info, and sure enough, he was let go right before New Year's 2006, but was able to maximize his severance, disability benefits, and COBRA due to her diligence. FYI, this benefited you, but it can also benefit the client. Often at a big company, the annual budget is based on the prior year spend. You don't want to leave money on the table because then next year's budget gets reduced. So if you're in quarter 4 and projecting not to spend your full budget, pulling forward some costs from the next year, for example by getting a vendor to invoice you in advance for future services, can ensure you spend all that was budgeted and keep things on track for the next year. Michael: why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5? Oscar: your mommy and daddy give you $10 to open up a lemonade stand. So you go out and buy cups, and you buy lemons, and you buy sugar, and now you find out that it all only costs you $9. Ha ha! So you have an extra $1. Yeah, so you can give that $1 back to mommy and daddy, but guess what? Next summer, I'll be 6. And you ask them for money, and they're gonna give you $9, because that's what they think it costs to run the stand. So what you want to do is spend that $1 on something now, so that your parents think it costs $10 to run the lemonade stand. So the $1's a surplus. This is a surplus. In 2018, my mother also experienced an unexpected career change. She worked in the finance department of a large company and had long been stressed by health issues. Despite this, she worked hard to maintain her excellent performance until one day, Anna, a colleague in the HR department, took the initiative to find her and ask her to update some documents. Anna's attentiveness and care made my mother feel valued. A few months later, in early 2019, my mother received a notice that she was fired. Although she was shocked and lost, she soon realized that thanks to Anna's help, she was able to successfully obtain a considerable severance package and successfully applied for unemployment benefits and medical insurance. Story 6. I worked at a cancer charity, and half the people would order things for themselves and charge it to the charity, an eye-opening job for a 16-year-old. Some nonprofits are horrifically corrupt. Some are filled with deeply passionate and committed people. I work in the nonprofit space and have had overwhelmingly positive experiences with the 200+ organizations I interact with on a regular basis. There are some very bad actors in the space that make them all look worse though. Side note, screw the Susan G. Komen org and screw Autism Speaks. A family member worked at one of the big accounting firms. They were auditing a very well-known charity and found instances of them using program money to buy expensive stuff for staff members. The firm walked off the job. This is apparently very common. When you hear of someone losing their accounting firm, it's probably because something was found that wasn't totally kosher, and the firm didn't want to get all wrapped up in the controversy. I knew the owner of a very large charity, and they had resale shops. It was a pretty well-accepted fact that the employees were robbing the charity blind. Anything of any value that came into the stores was either outright stolen, or they were purchased at a deep discount by the employee before they ever made it to the floor. This was pretty consistent across all the stores, and in the end, they just decided to accept the loss as they felt they were making enough money that it didn't matter. My fiancé has worked in the finance departments of several charities. One of his jobs was processing the payroll. It's amazing how much the CEOs of charities get paid, especially as some of them only working 2 or 3 days a week, with perhaps 1 day a week in the office. This was pre-COVID, so many of them claimed to work from home but were never available during these so-called work hours. He also said that a lot of the people at the top would charge the charities for everything, even the cost of their commute to work. It was disgraceful. Story 7. I was never under an NDA, but the hotel is under new ownership, so I guess I can say it now. The hotel had no internet connection starting around 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., like clockwork every night. I don't know if it was just a system fault or if it was cost-cutting, but without the internet, the security cameras didn't work or record anything. The fire alarm system doesn't work either. The alarms go off, but it doesn't call for help. So, if we had a fire that started at 3 a.m., for example, then unless someone else that's driving by calls it in, I have no idea what's happening. One night, we had an assault weapon in the parking lot. The police needed camera evidence and our cameras didn't record anything because the internet was out. That was fun explaining to the detectives. As someone who works in property management, this seemed like an insane risk to take to save a small amount of money. Most fires start during those hours, and an insurance fire investigator would easily find out what was going on and why there was a no call-out. One moderate fire and the owners would be out of business. That's annoying as hell. On my last construction job, I got my quad con broken into and all my tools stolen. When the cops came to take a report, the GC and everyone on the job site learned the cameras automatically turned off at 5 p.m. and then on at 5 a.m. So basically the cameras were useless and only monitored the job site while people were there. Reminds me of an old IT story from back in the days when small companies would have their own servers. Even if they weren't using a server rack, could just be a single computer with lots of storage in a basement somewhere. A company was having an issue that their server was going down every night at about 1 a.m. They'd struggle in SSH for a while and it would eventually come back up and everything was fine by 2 or 3 a.m. It happened almost every night. No consistent fix was found. Monitoring software was installed and uncovered no faults. The server would just frickin' stop without warning. One night, someone was working on a project late into the wee hours. The janitor comes in and nonchalantly unplugs the server's power cable from the surge protector to plug in his vacuum. He'd been plugging it back in when he left. Noticed it restarted on its own and figured everything was fine. Story 8. I briefly worked at a university in South Florida in the late 90s and early 2000s. I was chosen to be on an academic integrity team, basically reviewing claims of plagiarism and cheating and deciding between the 5 of us whether it was valid or not. We were made to sign NDAs when we accepted the invite to be part of the team. There were 3 instances where an employee who was taking classes there clearly cheated and the issue was brought to our attention. Those 3 times the cheating was blatant. All 3 times we were told to let it go, as it would look bad for the university to have it get out. I'm not sure if this is common for other universities, but at the time I was under the impression that it was common practice everywhere. It was ultimately one of the main reasons I ended up quitting. I was and still am disgusted by it. I brought allegations of plagiarism to the University of Houston. The accused was a very popular superintendent of a nearby school district. I was interviewed by the university's integrity panel and often felt like I was the one suspected of wrongdoing. They even suggested the possibility of hackers uploading a plagiarized version to their database. I was disgusted. They went quiet after a year and a half, so I spoke at the Board of Regents meeting and asked the president of the board, Tillman Fertitta, to do the right thing. A week later, they concluded the investigation and pulled his dissertation. Google Lance Hind plagiarism today for more about the story. Happened in my lab during grad school. Another student blatantly copied/pasted from a website. The document was then used in a grant application. The student was eventually allowed to take a semester off and was re-enrolled later, with no other consequences. Except for us. The rest of the lab now had to prove we also didn't plagiarize for the rest of our grad work, despite having not even a hint of us doing it. I'm still pissed about it. Separately, when I was proctoring exams, I routinely had to stop just straight up cheating on tests. Like, folks would try looking up answers on their phones or computers, on open book tests. This is one of the reasons why I'd love to teach one day. I just can't go back. I'll keep the story short, but as a student, I had a situation where I had to petition something. I had over 30 pages of documentation only for my petition to be denied, and the reason for the denial being confidential. I had to get several other people involved, including my college's ombudsperson and several department heads. I was directed to an appeals process where I submitted a 90-page appeal for it to be rejected again for confidential reasons. I then found out that there was supposed to be a student representative on the appeals committee, but because he was my suite mate a year earlier, he was not allowed to speak on my behalf and there was no replacement. I eventually was forwarded to someone in the provost's office who spoke to someone and got my appeal approved by the end of the day. I feel that they didn't want me to go any deeper, as I had said that I was looking at options of sending things to the local news and filing an FOIA request, and I had been dealing with this situation for a year at that point and hadn't given up yet. Story 9. I worked for a website creation company back in 1999, managing the website for a big brand, a large bank that was sponsoring a round-trip paid ticket to the Super Bowl. I worked on the website that collected all the entries, and I posted the rules that the company's legal department wrote to describe the rules of the contest. A random winner was to be selected for the prize, and I wrote a software tool to randomly pick the winner to be used when the contest was over. When the contest ended, I was told to forget my tool, forget the rules, just look in the database and find someone in South Florida, where the Super Bowl was in 1999, so that the company wouldn't have to pay for airfare. I'm pretty sure this is illegal in the UK, where the Advertising Standards Authority has jurisdiction over advertised competitions. There are a large number of rules and regulations around competitions, and hence legal terms and conditions are available for most competitions run by companies. Obviously, not everyone follows the rules, but sometimes they are taken to task by ASA, reported usually by hobbyist compers who know the ins and outs of terms and conditions. Story 10. In Prince George's County, Maryland, county transit bus drivers are instructed following an accident they are not to speak to anyone until a supervisor arrives on scene. An approved method for not talking, especially to other drivers involved, is to feign injury. There's actually money allotted to pay the fines related to wasting 911 and emergency resources because analysts determined it was cheaper than costs associated with drivers accidentally admitting fault. There's also an entire audit and analyst team related to accidents because of the sheer volume of people who falsely claim to be on a bus during an accident. I work as a firefighter and I haven't experienced with bus companies, but employees of the railroad company will not give statements to anyone following an incident until a supervisor arrives on scene. They'll give their name and information about container contents if necessary, hazmat, etc., but nothing else to anyone. I can easily imagine bus companies taking a similar approach. Story 11. IT consultant of many, many winters. The most critical applications in banking, insurance, and finance run on badly outdated machines held together by duct tape, prayers, and compressed dust, standing in dark, wet corners in mostly forgotten basements. Also, those systems are written in the most obscure and long-dead programming languages, or even directly in assembler for a certain chipset, written by code wizards in their own idiosyncratic dialects, who are now long retired or even dead. Backup systems are mostly non-existent, or the data tapes are worn down to basically transparent tape. Even had a case around 2020 where a cleaning tape from '99 was still in the bay, due to the robot being faulty. If a cleaner or janitor pulls the wrong plug to find an outlet for their vacuum, there is a decent chance that whole branches or even institutions begin to crumble. Most of those systems will also never be updated due to their legacy status. AKA, we don't know what this is doing, or even how it is doing it, what it's doing, but it is a critical part of our whole infrastructure and nobody cares to touch it. But we will never invest the necessary sums to analyze those systems, write documentation, or even replace them. Story 12. Worked in technical customer support for an IT/hardware company. We were sold a bad batch of chips from a supplier. The chips caused random watchdog resets, which would cause random crashes and reboots. The company got a settlement due to it to remediate it, but the MBA/legal types deemed it too expensive to fix what was already in the field, so they fixed it in support. We had very strict talking points when our customers would report this issue. Everyone in the support team knew what the issue was and had each worked several cases of it, but our script made us act stupid, like it was a unique case that had never happened before. It is kind of hard to do that when you have replaced multiple units for the same customer in several weeks. But if you diverted from the talking points, you got counseled by management. This issue caused several very high-level outages/issues at many of our customers. We knew why, and we were told to act dumb and to bury it in process/procedures so we didn't take the hit on needing to replace the known faulty hardware. Story 13. Worked at a hospital specializing in cancer care. They were doing something new, actually targeting the type of cancer with the right type of chemo. Most cancer centers do not. So suppose you get cancer C, but the insurance companies/government mandates you get chemo for cancer A and B before treatment for C. As the money increases like tenfold, the downside for the patient with cancer C is they have to endure way more bouts of chemo than if they are just targeted cancer C. So if you ever find yourself in that really bad boat, make sure your doctor's treatment plan is for the right cancer, vice for the wrong checkbook. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.